back, everybody, to today's HR and Leadership Coffee Talk. So this is the fourth one that we're doing, and I'm so glad that we've had such a wonderful and welcome response. So I, again, am Daya Naif with Success Partner. I'm a professional coach, a certified mediator. I've practiced law for over 16 years and been contract general counsel. Edgar?
Hi, again, everyone. I'm Edgar Jatu of Afikium LLC. I'm an HR and career consultant. I'm also a certified mediator, nonprofit professional, problem solver, and workers' rights advocate.
So what we're covering today applies to companies with or anticipating employees, employers directing their back to office plans, employers with remote workers, and employers laying off employees. And again, these are based on the questions that we're receiving. Last time we talked a little bit about our best practices for employees returning to the office. Edgar, just like for you to give us an update on that.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of movement at the federal and state level to either provide more protections to workers or to pass more legislation in response to COVID-19, including the CDC passing out some additional guidelines. One of note that the CDC has recently issued is decreasing the quarantine time for employees that have been affected by COVID-19 to 10 days instead of 14 days. So I would say that, which I might have said before, it's super important to be up to speed on what you're responsible for and what you're mandated to do when bringing employees back to the workplace. And also, it's really important that you set up a time before they come in for employees to review your new policy and procedures and to train them on anything new that you'll be doing operationally, so that when people go back into the workplace, they feel safe, and you can also ensure the safety of your customers and clients.
Great. All right, so here's another question that I've gotten from employers. I feel the need to monitor my employees more, both the ones that are going to be in the office and remote. So how can I do this?
Well, in the past couple of months, there has been a substantial increase in the demand of employers to use employee tracking software. For both, particularly for workers who are working from home. And they can take the form of using a webcam to monitor an employee's productivity, monitoring their keystrokes, all sorts of surveillance. And in many instances, for workplaces that are still open during the pandemic, they've been using technology as a way to monitor social distancing and to ensure that employees are staying safe. So one very popular software is using someone's wireless phone to track their movements in an office space. A couple of things that I encourage employees to do. One, make sure that the technology that you're looking to use is something that you can legally use. For the most part, a lot of these technologies do go through a pretty rigorous vetting process before they're put on the market, but you still want to make sure that what you're looking to do has the intended purpose and does not expose you to any legal issues. Secondly, it's really important that you take into account the culture of your organization. Not all organizations are the same, and some employees collectively might have a visceral reaction to some forms of surveillance as opposed to others. So I would encourage employers to form a committee to study the use of various surveillance technologies and include employees in that, particularly if it's a small office environment. And think through, like, what are the purposes? Is it safety? Is it to ensure that people are staying on top of their productivity? What are the stated purposes, and make sure that the technology matches up to that as well. So not only the culture, but also what the purpose of using technology is. And finally, you want to communicate to the entire staff once you've made a decision what the technology is. Give them all the information that you can give them about the technology and what's being used for. If it's something that's particularly invasive, you might want to make sure that you get consent forms from employees, particularly if the technology will be storing some level of private or sensitive information for a period of time. And you want to communicate to people how long that information will be stored for and who has access to it. You know, I think that the take home is you want some level of employee buy-in, because the last thing you want, particularly given the state of affairs are in, are people who are disgruntled by the fact that they're being monitored and don't really understand why.
Mm. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And I like how you put the purpose of it. From my background in construction work, they've been using kind of a geofencing type technology to mainly for the safety of the workers. And again, that was something that was implemented and with full disclosure and buy-in, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
All right. So at office testing is showing up. So how do you develop and enforce office screening?
So the CDC and more importantly the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission have put out various guidelines as to what extent you can do employee testing and what is considered too invasive. As a general proposition, um, you know, testing workers um, is not something you should be doing. But because of COVID-19, guidelines have been developed to give employers some more flexibility. So right now, it's acceptable to do temperature checks. Um, so you can train someone to take everyone's temperature before they walk into a work site, and based off of the temperature reading, you can allow someone to enter the work site or you can send them home. And if you have to send them home, you have to be clear about what that means. So if it means that they have to submit to another test, and maybe 2 negative tests before they can come back to work, or you require them to go see a doctor to make sure that you know, they're not positive for COVID-19. You want to make sure you set out what that process will look like. Also, employers can discipline anyone that refuses to take a temperature check. So that's also important to know. Um, Beyond temperature checks, you cannot do anything that would be considered invasive. And so one thing that the EEOC has recently put out guidelines on is that employers can't do antibody testing for COVID-19. And what that entails essentially is taking a blood sample of someone. It's rife with too many concerns over privacy, other forms of discrimination that might come up, including disability or genetic information discrimination. So employers can't do that. So rule of thumb is with temperature checks or anything that's similar, you're not storing any information that might be sensitive. It's not invasive to someone's privacy in terms of you're not like penetrating the skin or collecting any sort of samples from someone, and the information is not something you have to store anywhere. But if you're trying to do anything else, it's probably going to be very challenging to do so, unless you can make sure that it's not invasive and doesn't violate any sort of employment protections or privacy of your workers.
Great. All right. Thank you. So something that we've been seeing, almost every business out there had to do some pivoting during this time. Was something that I'm seeing in the coaching industry for some of the businesses that shut down temporarily and laid off and furloughed their employees have come out with some of the most creative and amazing strategies to really phoenix from the ashes and move forward as things are starting to get re-energized and re-back to work. So some of the things that I've seen are employees coming back and they're not in their old role at all. Something completely different has happened. They're in a different industry. They're in a different mindset, a different culture at work. And, humans are not just plug and play. So one thing that employees, I'm encouraging employees to do is to be very communicative about a retraining plan, a reculturizing plan, and then giving people the benchmarks and the things that they will be expected to meet with the new program going forward. Ample training, ample time. Of course, I recommend coaching for these people that are coming back, the human capital, the lifeblood of our organizations. And again, I think with policy changes to go along with that. Yes, so just in getting up to speed, again, seeing if they're going to be a proper fit for the new organization going forward. I know people are very loyal to their employees and they want to bring them back and get them back into the workforce. But if the dynamic, if the firm has been or the business has been so dynamically changed, this might not be a good fit. Edgar, what can you add on that?
Yeah, it's definitely important to do a talent assessment to figure out where you are in terms of your personnel needs. And I would say that another important tidbit to add is the idea of cross-training employees. And I think moving forward, I think it'll be integral to survival to have employees that can do many different things, particularly if they have to do so in a pinch. And so I would encourage employers to think about that. Assessing your needs now, particularly if coming back to work still means that you're at 50% capacity in terms of demand for your product or services, but also start cross-training people so that if you're ever in a position where you have to lay off or furlough people again, you might have some employees that you can say, okay, well, this person can do 2 or 3 positions at once. And that would help us for a short period of time.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you, Edgar. All right, so as we've been welcoming questions from all over in all different topic areas, we did have some questions come in this time regarding cybersecurity. So we are inviting a guest for the first time to our HR and Leadership Coffee Talk, Mr. Dan Blatt with ShipShape IT, who is going to answer these 2 questions for us. The questions are, what steps do I need to take as an employer, if my employees log into our files from their personal devices? Of course, we're seeing that a lot.
Yep.
And what do I need to do with employees who have or will be laid off from this technology standpoint? So Dan, welcome and take it away.
So what steps do you need to take as an employer if your employees are logging in from their own devices? We call this BYOD, bring your own device. And the short answer is make them use corporate provided devices, and understanding that that's sometimes an economic issue, but if you can avoid it, you need to avoid it. So the risks that personal devices present is how and where data is stored is no longer governed by your backup policy. People can store data on their systems. If they're not storing it to the cloud, you might have a hard time restoring the data or even retrieving the data in the event that the employee terminates. It's very hard to govern your retention policy. Some organizations and some compliance bodies require you to retain data for 6 months, 6 years, for lifetime. And there's other data that for certain reasons you may want to delete earlier than that. If they're not centrally maintained and updated, anytime there's a delay in updating your antivirus files or operating systems, you can introduce malware to your network. And if you don't have a centrally managed platform, you probably won't know if somebody is delaying those updates or not maintaining an antivirus system that's approved by the corporate network. It's difficult to regulate these things because your private data and your employees' private data is now commingled. And so that leads to some challenges in terms of enforcing these policies on personally owned systems. There are some things you can do. Mandate layered security. Layered security is simply there's a mitigating level of security behind every other level of security, so that if something fails, there's another catch-all for it. A couple things that you can do very easily and with not a lot of money are centralized managed antivirus and anti-malware. You can either run those from your own IT department, or you can hire a managed service provider like ShipShape IT. Full disk encryption is really critical for all these home devices. If somebody leaves a device on a plane, on a bench at Starbucks, without full disk encryption, it's really about a 20 or 30-minute exercise for somebody to remove that hard drive, connect it to another system, and access every piece of data on there. Full disk encryption is free in Windows and Mac. It just needs to be implemented. It needs to be turned on. And I highly recommend that you take a look at that. One of the other downfalls of BYOD is that the data is not necessarily mandated to be stored to Office 365 or whatever cloud-based based applications you're using. A lot of times it ends up on the local system, where it's also with the personal information of the owner of that system. And so formalize where the data is going to be saved, ensure that you have a corporate backup plan that addresses these locations. And as important as implementing them is memorializing them for your protection, communicating them to staff in offer letters, 1099 agreements, onboarding and offboarding procedures, etc. Departing employees. So after you've had the cake or had security escort the person out, you want to make sure that all of the PC accounts are closed off and redirected. And so, for instance, for a mailbox, you may want to create a shared mailbox, have that forwarded to somebody, have a set period of time that you're going to be doing that. Make sure that after the system is renamed, that it's still being backed up consistent with your data retention and storage policies. Deactivate the Office 365 licenses, disable the user in terms of other systems that may not be tied to that, such as copiers or other office equipment. And on your hardware inventory, make a note that this user is gone and that the system is available for redeployment. All of these things should be worked out well in advance, like the first week of your engagement with an IT provider, or if you haven't done this internally, I highly recommend you go through the process. When people depart, sometimes it's chaotic, it can be emotional, and if you have this checklist of items and you understand exactly what needs to happen, it's a matter of just informing the right folks. Hope this helps. Thank you guys very much.
Was very informative. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and preview our next HR and leadership coffee talk. So on our next coffee talk, we are going to talk about employee onboarding, offer letters, contracts, and start time delays, and the questions that you have sent in. So as always, please email me at dea@thesuccesspartner.com so that we can have the most relevant and frequently asked questions on our coffee talk. Edgar, some closing remarks, please.
Yeah, closing remarks. I would say that now that the economy is starting to, thrive a little bit, it's important to start really thinking about the future, but also be mindful of the fact that we're still not out of the weeds yet. There's still concerns about a second wave of COVID-19, and also more immediately, students are starting to go back to school, whether it's virtual or in person, which will put further strain on some of your employees who are parents. So super important to, again, be flexible, take care of your employees, and to put into place policies to ensure that not only does your business stay afloat, but that you ensure the well-being of your employees.
Great. Great. And as always, thank everybody for viewing. You have access to us for being loyal viewers and being a participant of our HR Coffee Talk. So feel free to use our links. We now have a QR scanner code that will go directly to one of my website pages that has contact links for Edgar and myself. And also, since we had a guest speaker this week, Mr. Dan Blatt, I have included his email address as well if you have some follow-up questions for him. So please stay safe and see you again next time.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.